It is my absolute joy today to be joined by author Victor Foia. He wrote the book, the new release, No Purchase Necessary, A Game of Greed and Chaos, Book One. And so tell us, Victor, what was the inspiration for this book?
All right. First of all, do not mistake the title for meaning that you don't have to pay for the book. So the book, if you want to read it, the purchase is necessary. But speaking about the book itself and what inspired me, as you can see, I'm an old gentleman, and I've had many years, more than 7 decades, the opportunity to observe the society. And I've lived both in Europe behind the Iron Curtain and in Western Europe and then in the United States. So I've had a global view of how the society advanced over this last 70 years. And my observation is that there is a strong, definite trend towards extreme materialism. We are, especially after the dust of World War II settled and the greatest generation got down to making children in suburban houses and so forth, uh, the new generations began to be more and more obsessed with getting wealthy, getting rich. Today, I would say we haven't reached a limit by any chance, but uh, we are, and I exclude myself from this, but we are obsessed with the billionaires and their big yachts, the influencers, the uh, entertainers who have $50 million mansions and so forth. There is a general obsession with that. So, um, in observing this, I was reminded of the tulip mania that happened in Holland in the 1600s, 1630s or so, when the entire country was in the grip of a madness about speculating on tulip bulbs. And at some point, an ordinary tulip bulb would fetch the price of a mansion. So I said to myself, with our penchant for greed and this desire to get wealthy, what would happen if every person had a chance to become a billionaire? How could that be accomplished? And what would be the result of that? So I conceived of an online game of chance, which can be played for free, and that's what no purchase necessary refers to, whereby any person from the homeless on the street to the billionaire could win a prize worth more than $1 billion. And because it's free, and because of the advent of the internet and social networks and so forth, I imagine that this would develop into a mania that would spread out worldwide. And then I said, what would be the impact of that? And I uh, estimated that, billions and billions of man hours would be wasted on this game, because the way it was conceived is that you can play for free, but you need a key to unlock the game. And that key is released 3 times a day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and it's released at participating franchises like McDonald's and others. People would flock at these places to collect the key on the electronic display, then go to wherever they had the opportunity to get on a computer and attempt to play the game. I mean, play the game until they win. And this goes on and on. So the book, if we can talk about the book right now, is an intertwining of two stories. It's the story of a genius mathematician who's on the spectrum and therefore not very able to deal with the real world, and how his life devolves from a position of professor at the university on the East Coast to becoming homeless because of his inability to deal with the real world. And then the other story is the story of how the game evolves from its modest beginnings to the point where it takes over the world. And then these two stories collide in volume 2, whereby this genius mathematician who himself is not interested in money at all. He's completely immune to that. He's setting himself the task to stop this game because it appears to be unstoppable. And in the meantime, a state of dystopia has set in the world. And the book shows how the television channels are preoccupied with reporting on the game, on its effects, on the riots that ensued throughout the world. Because when people go to wait for this key, they can't get close enough to the display, so they are fighting over it. Or if they miss one number, then they are screwed. They can play that hour. There are 3 sessions every day when you can play, and those are called the windows. So these 2 stories intertwine and then come to a fruition at the end of volume 2. So
I
that's
love it. So this is book 1, and so does that
book
mean
1.
book 2 is
Yes, but
coming soon?
the book 1 is already received from viewers good reviews, and even though it is mostly about Sebastian Sinclair, the mathematician, uh, the game is interspaced with his story. So we know in the background there the game is beginning to evolve, and then by the end it's taking hold of everybody.
Incredible, and so very much like the world today, just with everything new that comes up. And just
Yes.
it's
Well,
very it's everyone's very materialistic too. So you're right. I could see this happening. So
I
that's
mean,
where it makes
wouldn't you play a game where all you have to do is get a number, and then if the game is played via on the screen Wheel of Fortune? So enter this number, pull the wheel, and you have a chance to get. It's progressive. You have to earn tiles towards the final number. But why wouldn't you play if it's free and the price could be more than $1 billion? And
exactly.
it's hard to resist it, even for people who are not that interested in getting rich. I said, well, yeah, but $1 billion is $1 billion.
Yeah, exactly. People can say they wouldn't, but I bet they would. So yes.
Yeah, and then this can become like the tulip mania. And I give several quotations from books describing the tulip mania, is that people from the lowest levels of the society to the highest could not stop speculating because the gains were so enormous. And of course, it was a bubble, as this is a form of a bubble. And it's a lot more complex than I described it, but for the purposes of this interview and to whet people's appetite to purchase the book.
Oh, I love it. It sounds fascinating to me. It sounds incredible. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today about you?
Well, about me, all I can say, or a couple of things I can say, is that I'm a product of the Cold War. I was born in Transylvania, of all places. Most people don't know that place really exists, but it does. And I was born only about 90 miles from the house where Dracula was born. And that house still stands. And it was my first field trip when I was about 6 years old. We were taken to visit his house in the town of Sigishora. And that led to, I would say, a lifetime fascination with this character, which leads to the fact that after I escaped from the communist country, from behind the Iron Curtain, I found my way to the United States, and then there I was surprised to see that people were talking about Dracula as if they knew who he was, and I was like, how could they know about this? He was a king, equivalent of a king of a province that is called Wallachia, that's part of Romania today. So how could they know about this obscure king? And then I was set straight, saying, no, Dracula is a famous vampire. Well, that got me a bit upset because I had come to admire him for his true valor, which was to defend Europe against Islam and the invasion of the Ottoman Empire. And then I said to myself, somebody ought to write his real life story and set the record straight. So I began a long process of researching, which took me throughout all the places that he had visited and where he was imprisoned and held hostage and so on. And it took me, during this time, of course, I had a family and I had to feed them. So I couldn't be a professional writer, but I collected information, studied the subject, and when I retired at the age of 63, excuse me, I decided to write his story, and the book is called Dracula Chronicles, available on Amazon, and I have 4 volumes written that outline his life from early boyhood to maturity. And if I find the energy, I will continue to write in that direction. But after writing 4 volumes, I felt burned out. It was the amount of research you have to do for this is incredible. So I said I needed a palate cleanser. And so I decided to go back to this idea of today's society and how vulnerable it is to greed and chaos. And so I wrote this book, and hopefully I've captured the atmosphere of the day.
Well, I think you are fascinating, and you should also write a nonfiction story about your life. I
I've been
think that
I've been told many times, because my escape is somewhat fascinating to other people. To me, it wasn't. It was scary.
it's fascinating to me. I mean, I think for every person would love to hear that story as well, on
I,
top of your other books as well.
I am considering possibly writing. I don't want to say nonfiction, because there isn't enough substance to a one-person story. But I have many other stories related to that subject. So I'm considering writing a novel about life in a communist country, and involved with escapes and so forth, that would culminate with the 1989 revolution, which, for those who don't know, Romania, when the communists fell and communism fell in 1989, and then 1990 in Russia, the only country that had a bloody revolution was Romania. All the others found ways to shake off communism without bloodshed, or at least without major bloodshed. Romania had tens of thousands of people killed, including their dictator, Nicolae Ceausescu, and his wife, who were executed by firing squad on Christmas Day in 1989, which, sorry to say, but it was a joyful day for me, for obvious reasons.
Well, for the downfall of communism, yes,
Well,
absolutely.
because I've lived there for 22 years, and I had all the problems that exist in a communist country. And then finally I managed, and that will be in the book, how I managed to escape.
I would love to hear that story. And I think, especially as Americans, we haven't ever faced anything like that. And so
Yes,
I don't think people understand.
yeah, you've been sheltered, thank God, from a lot of those things, the vicissitudes of dictatorship so far. And the other thing is that I left Romania with approximately $100 or so hidden in my shoes, which, by the way, it was illegal in Romania to own foreign currency, but I managed somehow to get it on the black market. I ended up in a refugee camp in Italy, where I spent almost a year in a refugee camp. During that time, I proposed to myself to learn English, because I knew I was coming to America. I was hoping to come to America. But I was so in love with the Italian language that instead I learned Italian. So I found myself landing in Chicago with no more than about 10 words of English. And I'll tell you, it was pretty tough. I had 4 years of university education in mathematics and physics, but there wasn't much use in Chicago, especially when you don't speak the language. So I worked as a janitor's helper for 3 years. But during that time, I managed to go back to school and working part-time and getting a degree in computer science, which was extremely new at that time, 1971. People didn't know what computers were. And then from there, I made a nice family, a wife and two American wife, beautiful children, and I rose through the uh, executive levels to position of CEO of an international corporation, and with subsidiaries in Europe and Australia. But throughout that time, I continued to research the life of Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. So now that will not be part of that book that I would write, because that would end up with a revolution. But there'll be plenty of stuff in the book itself to keep people interested.
Well, I am excited. I think you are a fascinating person. I could listen to you talk all day about your life and everything. And but we recommend everyone, pick up this book. It's an audiobook. It's available on Audible, and it's available on Amazon, online books where books are sold. You are a fascinating person, and I have a feeling that we're going to be hearing a lot more from you as you
Thank you.
progress. And I would like to see a movie about your life, and also read your books. Your books sound fascinating. So thank you so much for joining us today and and sharing so much with us.
Thank you, Stacy.
You're gonna laugh, but I can't find the. There we go.